This is the final mass production version of the Pimax Crystal Super OLED optical engine, and in this video I'm going to give you my full conclusion, my verdict on whether Pimax made this better or maybe even made it worse. So if you're interested, please do stick around, stay tuned after a quick word from our sponsor, VRWave. They do produce the best lens inserts that I've come across for a full range of VR headsets that include HTC, of course Pimax, which you're looking at right now, as well as the Quest, Valve, PSVR 2, you get the idea. And the great thing about lens inserts is they help keep your lenses free from scratches, but also they do account for astigmatism if you're nearsighted or farsighted. And with blue light filters, they also help combat motion sickness and insomnia. VRWave also have a Christmas promotion going on right now, so I'd highly urge you check out my link in the description below. Right, so let's get into this because I've got a lot to tell you and some technical information, and of course my final conclusion on whether the Pimax Crystal Micro-OLED version of their Super range is your next headset for 2026. So as you know, I've been using the pre-production version for quite a long time now, but this one has eye tracking, as you can see here. It has a full 90Hz refresh rate and a larger field of view. And I'm going to explain why this is both a positive and perhaps even a negative with this final version. So as we unbox it, I must say it's very striking, quite unusual of course seeing those lenses inside a large optical engine. But if you compare them to say the big screen Beyond and even the Megan X, they're actually larger lenses than they seem. It's just because of the housing. It is very nicely packaged, I must say. It's great to see some protective film over those lenses as well. So let's just get into the specification of the Micro OLED first. We are talking top tier Sony 4K Micro OLED displays at 3840 by 3552, which is around 53 ppd. And in practice, it actually feels sharper than this because of those immense colors. Let's just go through some of the major positives of this headset first before I go through quite a lot of things that are negatives as well, and at the end I'll give you my conclusion. So the big party piece or raison d'etre about the Crystal Super OLED is the combination of those concave view pancake optics with this Sony Micro OLED panel. In the past, we've always struggled to get a really sharp Micro OLED display paired with a great lens design. Finally, we have it with the Crystal Super Micro OLED. It is a superb, fantastic even lens design, and it's very comfortable on the eyes. It's not perfect though, and there is a sweet spot still, but overall the eye box or sweet spot, that's where you move your eyes around and it looks sharp, is very good in this and very comfortable. It's actually quite close to even the Quest 3 in terms of lens design, not in terms of visual quality. There's a massive difference between the two, okay folks? I'm talking about the actual optics themselves. That is a huge, massive achievement, especially as these tiny Micro OLED displays really pack a punch, but to get the right optics to make them shine is very hard, and only big screen have managed to nail it in their version 2. Keep in mind, this is Pimax's first entry into the world of Micro OLED, and in terms of their lens design, they have absolutely nailed it. It is really nice. But it's not perfect though, and there is things like glare, and actually it can be quite strong in some scenes. Not many people have said this, if anyone, but I have noticed now that I spent a lot of time with this particular module that there are certain lighting conditions that you will see a fair bit of glare at the bottom of the lens. Now for someone like me who actually hates glare, believe it or not, it's still not an issue for me because it doesn't happen all the time, and it's not there all the time. It's only in certain situations. But if you do hate glare and you cannot stand any glare, then this module is not for you. Go for one of the aspheric lens optical engines. I've got full reviews of the ultra wide, the 50 ppd and 57 on the channel. So that's my first negative really, is the glare. There is glare in this, folks, absolutely, but it's not glaringly obvious, okay? Sorry, I just had to say that. Anyway, let's move on now, because this is an interesting topic, is the field of view. In this final production version, they have changed it. In my pre-production, it was 108 degrees and only 72 hertz. This final version, the one you're going to get, hopefully, will have 90 hertz, which I'm using now, which is fabulous, by the way. 90 hertz in this panel is absolutely fantastic. Another massive positive for this display. But it does have a larger field of view. I say but because, in my opinion, it's not quite as comfortable as my pre-production unit at 108 degrees. Now, when I first got the headset, I was actually really concerned because it didn't feel right on my eyes. After about 20 minutes or so, I'd take the headset off and my eyes just didn't seem to be able to focus very well for a few seconds, something I never experienced with any other VR headsets. Coupled this with really bad warping as well. I was absolutely tearing my hair out. I thought, oh my god, this is really bad, because the pre-production was so much better. But thankfully, when I fed back this to Pimax, they was very quick to rectify this, and I now can reassure you that the latest distortion profile that I now run, and this will be in the final version or even better than this, is so much better. So that's sort of like half a day of panic I can now lay to rest, because I can tell you folks, it looks fabulous in this thing, and I have done so far about an hour or so testing time. I don't really have as much time to fly in VR as I used to now that I'm a dad, but as you can see here through this through the lens footage, which is from the pre-production model, by the way, some of it is from the final unit, it's exactly the same now, and it looks absolutely incredible. In fact, I will say it is the best VR visuals I've ever seen to date. That's pretty amazing, because I have tried both consumer and non-consumer VR headsets that are worth tens of thousands of pounds, but this beats them all now. So that little niggle has been nipped in the bud, shall we say. We can move on from it. Now, the reason I told you that is because this is Pimax after all, and they tend to change things, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. So at the time of this recording, the profile that I'm using is really excellent, but this could change. That concerns me. So Pimax, if you're watching this, the profile that I'm using right now that you gave to me, please use this. Don't change it too much, because it works really well. So let's talk about some of the actual figures of these profiles, because there are two options at the moment, which is a narrow field of view, but also a normal field of view. So let's just talk about that now. Now, I've used HMDQ to get these figures, very useful tool, highly recommended. The horizontal field of view renders at a max 116.5 degrees. Vertically, it's 103.34 degrees. And the overlap now is 89.40, which I think is a really nice balance. Now, with their previous profile, I think they stretched it out too much at 119 degrees horizontal, with an overlap of, I think it was 87.15. I'll just show you the result here. And I think that was just stretching things far too much. And I'm really glad that they changed it to go back and just increase that overlap a little bit more. There is, however, a narrow version of this field of view as well. Now, the horizontal field of view is 96.58 according to HMDQ, with a vertical field of view of 103 degrees, and the overlap again is 89.4. So at the moment there is no option in the software to change the overlap. But when it's all said and done, folks, even with this new distortion profile, which does feel great, in my opinion, I still feel, for me personally, that the pre-production version of the headset was just a little bit more comfortable on the eyes, because the overlap was a lot larger, or it's either that or the field of view versus the overlap percentage was balanced much better. And if you think about other micro OLED headsets, generally speaking, they max out at around 110 degrees. With this, well, it's a lot larger, so there is some sacrifices being made. So in terms of my actual figures, this is interesting, because my field of view figures are, for the horizontal, 110 degrees. That's with a 65 IPD. Now, of course, my head shape will be different from yours. My eyes, you know, will be inside my skull differently to yours. So this really is just my own results. And again, for the vertical, I got around 88 degrees horizontal. So I was actually a bit disappointed by that, if I'm honest, especially as Pimax are really trying to max out that overlap. But for me, it hasn't really made a huge difference to the field of view horizontally. I think some of that, though, is down to the facial interface, which could be better designed for the micro OLED module, because I do think that these facial interfaces that I used haven't been redesigned at all from when using the aspheric lenses. I do think that could be something they could look into. And here lies in another negative for me. For my particular head shape and my nose, I do find that the left lens tends to protrude out a bit too much and hit the side of my nose sometimes. When I'm glancing left out onto the scenery or whatever, I just find that the lens hits my nose, so I have to make sure that I'm not too close to the lenses, which is something that is really important with this type of lens design, because the closer you are to those lenses, the better the sweet spot, better the field of view, and the less color fringing you're going to get. That's my third negative. There's no doubt the first time you put this headset on, especially in a white background such as the Microsoft Flight Simulator menu system, you're going to see a brown tinting on the outer edges of your peripheral vision. This is something that will be quite jarring to start with. Now, it's important to get as close to these lenses as possible, because then you don't really notice it so much. Now, rest assured that after a few minutes, and especially once you're in the sim, or whatever game you're playing, once you've got the full color palette and you're looking around, you'll hardly notice it. But if the headset is not on quite correctly, say it's on at an angle, or you don't have your eyes close to those lenses, you will see a bit of color fringing or brown tinting on the edges of the display. That's not a thing just with this headset, it's just a thing with micro OLED in general, and it is a trade-off to be aware of. I didn't bother checking out the narrow field of view, but one thing I will say that I think is interesting. With the narrow field of view, of course, the rendering target is also going to be less. So say if you got a lower spec GPU, then you'll actually find that the narrow field of view setting will run a lot better in full TAA mode at full native resolution. But interestingly, the rendering target is very, very high on the HMDQ settings. But checking it in Microsoft Flight Simulator using TAA mode at high setting, which is the max setting before oversampling, my resolution was 5522 by 5356, that is TAA mode. Now, of course, that will change once Pimax start fiddling around with the distortion profile and as things sort of develop. But that's sort of the ballpark of where we're at the moment. That could go a lot higher. And interestingly, the Pimax Play tool, if you're running a high-end GPU such as a 5090, it will automatically oversample a little bit the headset if you use auto mode. Then you can get right into the 6,000 plus per eye. But I must admit, with a 5090, it can handle it. And overall, I find the performance very good with Pimax XR, even with a 5070 Ti. Now, another negative, which I think might even be part of Microsoft Flight Simulator, I'm not quite sure, but there are times during some dimly lit scenes like this when looking at clouds where I see a bit of vertical scaling lines. This is something that I'm pretty sure no one else is going to mention, but I am a lot more picky than most YouTubers out there, and there is some very faint, incredibly faint grey scaling lines that appear sometimes in very high contrast scenes. That is something though that I'm sure they can fix in firmware, but it is there a little bit. But honestly, I'm pretty confident most people are not going to even notice this. And the great thing about micro OLED is, of course, you don't get any mirror in that display. So when looking at clouds, generally speaking, you're not going to see anything but those clouds. That is something very intrinsic about this design of micro OLED, is there is no interruptions between you and the scene you're in, whether it's a game, a zombie shooter, or in my case, flying in those beautiful fluffy clouds in my Spitfire. There is no artifacts, no blemishes, nothing to tell me and my eyes that I'm looking through a screen. As far as I can tell, I'm in that Spitfire, I'm looking at those clouds, and there is absolutely no interruptions. That is one of the massive advantages of micro OLED, as is of course black levels. But again, this is something I don't quite understand, but in Microsoft Flight Simulator only, the black levels aren't as good as in the Megan X and Play for Dream. However, in other sims and games, I've tried DCS, I've tried X-Plane 12, I've tried Metro and Half-Life Alyx, the blacks are fantastic. So there's something weird going on with MSFS 2024, but the black levels aren't quite where I'd want them to be personally when compared to other micro OLED headsets. But I don't think that's a problem for the Crystal Super itself. That's just a weird thing with the sim itself. So just take that with a pinch of salt. But I had to mention it because I'm literally mentioning everything I possibly can, both positive and negatives. If we just stick with the negatives for the time being as well, there is some heat that can be produced from this headset. I do wonder if it's because the optical engines were initially designed for the aspheric lenses, but a 4K micro OLED display does kick out a lot of heat. So it would be nice in, say, the future if Pimax can implement a fan speed setting in the software, just for those times where you just really, could do with a bit more breathability, I guess, in the headset. Overall though, again, it's not a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of. Now, of course, brightness is, I guess, another negative for this type of display. If you're looking for a really bright summer day type of feeling, then I would recommend going for the QLED variants because they are brighter. But for me, and again, this is a personal thing, the brightness in the OLED module feels more natural because it's a lot more dramatic between the dark and the light. The contrasting difference in colors are so dramatic that, say, a storm, or perhaps, when the light kind of shines onto the cockpit environment, the difference between the light and shade is a lot more dramatic, fooling you into thinking that it's brighter than it is. I actually don't mind the brightness in this at all. I think it's fantastic. In terms of persistency and motion blur, I didn't notice any of that, but I'm not the best person to ask, folks, because I don't flick my head from side to side. I don't use VR like that. I'm the kind of guy who sits in my motion rig or sits on my chair and likes to take all of the scenery in. Even when I'm flying like this, notice I'm not really flicking my head from side to side too much, but when I did, I didn't notice any issues with motion blur. That's not to say it's not there, it's just not something that I'm particularly susceptible to. So you might want to just check out another reviewer for that particular side of things. And a quick one about the ergonomics. This again is personal, but I actually really like the Crystal Super housing. It makes me feel like I've got a helmet on and I kind of put it over me like I'm inside that cockpit, especially with the DMAS audio, which is fantastic and really only second to the index audio, and it's very close to it. I really do feel the inside-out tracking system, which works well for this type of experience. I can't really tell you what the tracking's like for Beat Saber, couldn't care less. But for flying, as you can see here, even in the motion rig, not a problem for me personally, as long as you've got decent lighting. The ergonomics feel fine. I will say though, that now that I'm used to the Megan X Superlight 8K and Big Screen Beyond, I was quite shocked going back to a large headset like this, but after a while I got used to it. I would recommend a top strap, but bear in mind this is still a very large and bulky headset, and if you'd rather go for the smaller form factor, then wait for the Pimax Dream Air, which hopefully I'll be reviewing and checking out very early next year, fingers crossed. So I think it's now time to sum up everything, okay? This is my full sort of conclusion of the Pimax Crystal Micro-OLED module. I've been very critical on many areas of this headset, but you'll be surprised to know that without question, without any shadow of a doubt, this is my daily driver, my favourite VR headset of them all. This is the one that I'll always pick up and enjoy. The Micro OLED visuals, that Sony 4K display, coupled with those fantastic optics, really are the star of the show. They are superb. And actually, one thing I haven't mentioned is the eye tracking, which does work really well. It's a major deal for this headset because this is the first one of the Micro OLED headsets I've ever tried that supports true dynamic foveated rendering out of the box. With Pimax XR, it works wonders and gives you a whole load of performance back, and I really do applaud Pimax for getting this right. Together with those deep, rich and vibrant colours, the sense of presence and immersion, dare I say, is absolutely off the scale. The sharpness in the far distance is far better than the Play for Dream, which, you know, even with Steam Link, it's even better for me than the Megan X. I don't know why, because it's very similar in terms of the visuals, but those optics and that 4K Sony display, as I keep mentioning, is fantastic. The negatives, well, they are quite a few, such as there is a slight warping even with this current distortion profile, but it's not an issue for me. It can produce some heat over a long session. The brightness is not as good as a QLED headset. The comfort, well, I find it very comfortable, but it's not as comfortable as a Megan X or Big Screen Beyond. There is glare, and in some cases it can be quite strong, so bear that in mind. There is colour fringing as well on the far outer edges, especially if you don't have the headset on correctly or if you're not quite close to those lenses. The field of view figures, as you can see, are not as good as, say, the QLED headsets. Like the standard 50 ppd module, I get 126 degrees horizontal with that, or 136 with the ultra wide. That's quite a difference. And in some scenes, I do notice slight grey scaling lines in certain scenarios. But those negatives are from someone who has had a lot of experience in VR and can notice the minor imperfections. And I'll tell you the whole story, guys, as you always expect from this channel. But the positives, in my opinion, far outweigh the negatives. I guess another negative could be the price. It is expensive, but then these displays are the best in the business. But the positives are the best-in-class visuals, incredible sharpness, even further out. The fill factor is astonishing, as well as the lacquer mirror. The colours are rich, vibrant. You get a fantastic sense of just being inside that cockpit. You've got great optics, especially considering that this is a pancake lens with a Micro OLED display. The eye tracking works great out of the box, which is a huge achievement for Pimax. The field of view is okay for this type of display, not amazing, but then no Micro OLED display is amazing with field of view. If that's your thing, go for the ultra wide model. And again, the visuals, I think it's worth saying yet again how incredible that Sony display is. It is absolutely fantastic. And it is now my personal favourite VR headset by a country mile. Now the question remains, can Pimax produce these optical engines with the OLED module at a high level of good quality control? That is something that I can't answer. I can only review the headset that they send to me. I really do hope they succeed because they've got a first-class winner on their hands. And honestly, I can't really see anything beating this even in 2026. Perhaps their own Dream Air for form factor, but it's going to have the same display as this. But it's fair to say Pimax don't have the best track record when it comes to quality control. So please keep this in mind, and remember you do have a 14-day returns policy. Use it, folks, because you might need it. If you get a good one, then you're going to have the best experience any flight simmer could possibly wish for. But there could be problems when they start to mass produce it. If you found this video useful, and all of my videos this year, because it's been an absolutely crazy time, I do have a very nice discount, actually, a Christmas discount for the Crystal Super Micro-OLED that's available right now. Feel free to purchase yours through it. But for now, I think that will do. May I wish you a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care, and bye for now.